Robert Harris is an author and a former journalist with a catalogue of really successful novels and screenplays and awards under his belt. I recently read his book Conclave and finished it in about a day and a half. It really grabbed me from the word go. So I went looking to see if he'd given any advice or guidance for other writers, and I found a few quotes that I thought might be helpful for us. So let's get started. Number 1, the shape and style of a novel is determined by the thought you give it beforehand. The way you approach your material is at least as important, maybe more important, than the material itself. This is a really interesting concept. A lot of what we do as writers, it seems, at least to me, to be based on control in some way. Controlling the structure, dialing in the voice, keeping the plot in line, definitely for me. It's all important stuff, but I've often felt like I only have so much control over all of that. Writing a book for me sometimes feels like I'm working with some kind of clay or moldable material, and I only have so much time to get it in the shape that I want it to be in before it sets solid, after which point I can only really carve it or add embellishments or details. I can't change the bulk of the thing itself. Hopefully that makes sense. But what Robert Harris is saying here, I think, is that that bulk perhaps is mainly decided in the process of discovering your idea. It's the prep work that your mind does almost subconsciously, processing flashes of inspiration and motivation into an idea. In that way, a lot of what a novel might become, you might say, is already decided. It's fundamental to the story, much like how DNA makes up a person. I really quite like that concept. Perhaps it feels particularly apt for me at the moment because I've not long started a new project after struggling to get another one going and having to shelve it. And this new thing is just coming to me a lot more, I won't say easily, but definitely more directly. It's very voice-driven, very personality-based, both in terms of the character and the way that I'm writing it. In Harris's words, the way I'm approaching the material is the driving factor in getting it written. If we think about what that might mean, that our writing might begin to shape itself before we've even written a word of it, or it might start to take some kind of unique form before we've actually written a sentence, that to me sounds very much like the concept of an inherent author's voice. And leading with voice, I think, is never going to take us too far wrong when writing a book. That's how it feels for me anyway. And if you're new here, I'm Kieran. I'm a writer and a freelance editor, and I love to help writers tell their stories while having fun. So thanks for being here. Number 2, there's something inherently dramatic about an election. It's comparable only to an auction or the reading of a will. If you're not aware, this is a quote really concerning his book Conclave, and a little more specific of a quote than I would usually pick for this type of video. However, I thought it might still be useful as a demonstration of a concept. At its heart, an election is the answer to a question. For Conclave, without spoiling anything, it's a very interesting question of this or this or this. The entire book is centred around what the outcome of that election will be. It's in the reader's eye line for the entire duration. It's what drives the story forward. While of course not every book will feature an election, I think every book should feature a question. There should be something that similarly drives the story forward, something that the reader wants to know the answer to or the outcome of. Whether you're writing a mainly plot-driven book like a mystery, and the thing that the reader wants to know is just who done it, or you're writing a more literary story and the question there might be as open as what will happen to the character. In both ways, and in many more I suppose, having that question there is a key part of keeping a reader invested. And when I say keeping a reader invested, by the way, I don't mean we need to write the novel equivalent of a Mr. Beast video where every 2 seconds there's a flash of bright colour and someone shouts at you. I just mean give the reader something larger to focus their attention on. Keep something in their eye line to bring purpose and direction to your story. It doesn't have to be a big thing, but it can be. It doesn't have to be a complex thing, but it can be. Whatever the case, I think there should be something. The light at the end of the tunnel should be visible, and then however you choose to get to it as the author, whether that's running down the tunnel, swimming, flying, or climbing the walls, it's just dependent on your story and your style. Number 3, each to his own obsession. Perhaps the advice ought to be, write what you feel passionate about. This quote's from a comment he made about the old adage, write what you know, which is something I've probably mentioned in these videos 2 or 3 million times, so I won't linger here too long. All I really want to say is that I agree with Harris's interpretation or his rewriting of that rule. I do think that's a much better way of putting it. Being passionate about something, I think, is a source of fuel, provided that is that you actually do know about the thing that you're passionate about. Having some knowledge and experience in the subject, or having done your research on it, I think is really important. Though we're writing fiction, we should still be telling the truth as much as we can. That's a concept from my last episode, by the way, with Patricia Cornwell. And in order to tell the truth, we do have to know what it is. And I don't say that to gatekeep, by the way, but practically, it's going to be a lot easier to write a great book about something if we don't have to patch up a load of inconsistencies and plot holes on that main subject that we're writing about. Not to mention the question of authenticity and how we make our stories realistic. We always need to take that into account. The other thing I wanted to say is that write what you know is often taken to mean write about what you've directly experienced only. But I don't think practically that's always particularly realistic. So if you feel driven to write about a passion of yours and you've done the legwork for it, write your story. Number 4, novels are like news stories one can approach as a journalist. A crash, say, or a scandal. The events have already occurred and your job is to tell the story. Harris using his background in journalism here to bring what I think is quite a unique perspective to fiction writing. I often find in the course of working on a story, I ask myself, what's going to happen next? And I suppose in some ways, maybe subconsciously, that gives my stories a weaker structure. I do always have an ending in mind when I write anything. That's how I manage to stay on track. But perhaps it would be an interesting exercise to just think of a story in the past tense. Think of it as what happened, rather than what I tend to do, which is the present, what's going to happen next. There's something that feels more solid and more permanent in the former, I think, and more open and changeable in the latter. As someone who doesn't plan all that much as I write, I think there's only so much detail I'll be able to pin down and only so many twists and turns I'll think up before I get into the story and I see how the land lies. But trying this still might shore up those few bits I already have. I think you can definitely read this in Harris's work though, for sure. Everything feels really certain and solid. It makes you feel like you're in really good hands as you progress through his stories. Something to think about and try perhaps. If you find you meander and lose the story sometimes, think of it as something that's already been decided, not something that could change at any given moment. Number 5. I really believe that 50% of the whole effort of writing a novel is in the first paragraph. Essentially, it's like telling a joke, a matter of hooking your audience in from the start. 3 men walk into a bar isn't a bad opening line, ever. Once you've got the first paragraph right, if you've picked the right situation, the right point of view to describe it from, then you're fine and it becomes fun. But you're lucky if you get that. As an editor, I see a lot of first paragraphs, and honestly, it's one of the most fun and interesting parts of my job. While there's this central idea, as Harris says here, that it has to be important and hook the reader into the story, which I do agree with, the breadth and depth of ways to do that is seemingly endless. I've worked on stories with fantastic opening lines and paragraphs already in place, and I've helped other writers really get to the heart of what they wanted to say with theirs. Your first paragraph has to make an impression on the reader, but that doesn't mean that your paragraph has to end with someone dangling over the mouth of an erupting volcano. You can make an impression on a reader in how you write, not just what happens. Your character's voice can be what makes the impact, or the location in which the story is taking place. So I very much agree with Robert Harris' advice here, but if I could be so bold as to add to it, I'd suggest writers consider what their natural strengths are and use those as the hook that grabs the reader. That, I think, is you making a promise that you can keep with your writing. I could write an action-packed and plotty opening paragraph full of twists and turns, but because plotting isn't my strong point, by the end of the first chapter, readers might start to feel a bit cheated. By all means, make an impact in your opening paragraph, absolutely, but make it in your own way, perhaps. If this video has made an impact on you, sorry. Check out my playlist of other author videos on screen now. Thank you so much for watching as always, and happy writing.